Well, the first round of the 2014 Formula One World Championship is in the books from Albert Park in Melbourne, and of course Nico Rosberg taking victory in that event. Daniel Ricciardo currently is classified in the second position, with McLaren's Magnussen in the third position. However, there is some breaking news. We'll talk about that in just one moment's time. This is just another Grand Prix podcast here on GlacierTV. Nick Rowland is currently away. He might be back a little bit later on. So it's currently Will Vincent along with Randy Shenworth and also Nick. We're just going to call him Nick because I can. So yeah, breaking news coming out of Melbourne is that Daniel Ricciardo has been sent to the stewards, and this is because of one of the articles in the FIA regulations. It is FIA regulation 5.1.4, which states that fuel mass flow does not exceed 100 kilograms per hour. And it does seem as though that Daniel Ricciardo might actually lose that second position because of him exceeding that. We'll get more about that a little bit more later on. However, we'll talk about the race to start with. And Randy, it was an interesting race from the very start of it because, of course, Lewis Hamilton getting pole position in that Mercedes number 44 car. As soon as the light went out, however, it was a completely different story. He looked on the back foot from the very start of the race.
Yeah, I think he got caught out by that double install lap the guys had to do due to the, I believe it was the Malaysia they got stuck in the install lap. But yeah, car overheated and they lost a cylinder, and the team decided to just bring him in and try to save the engine rather than getting rid of one of their 5 engines later for the season right after round 1.
And you make a really good point now, actually, because, of course, we did have that double installation lap, and we had a total of 3 cars who had to start this race on pit road, both of the Mauritius as well as one of the Lotuses. And what a lot of people who are new to Formula One don't realise is that it is so stressful, these starts on the engines, because of the fact that they're sat there idling with no air going through the side pods at all. And these engines heat up so quickly that having to do one lap, then crawl around, not getting any air into the engines, and do it again, puts a huge strain on these cars.
Yeah, sometimes even just not even where if you're when they're doing those pace laps, they can get so hot. I remember an incident a few years ago where I think it was Raikkonen at Monaco. His car caught fire during a safety car period, I believe.
I think you're right there, actually, yeah. And I mean, even under safety car conditions, and we did have a safety car here today, you will see the guys trying to get as much airflow into their car as possible. But, of course, Hamilton out of the race early, but also Sebastian Vettel out of the race as well. And I know you were making a joke about it, how both the Caterhams actually finished ahead of Sebastian Vettel in this race.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. I think Vettel's a bit overrated, but that's just me. I'm sure we're about to generate a whole lot of hate, but hey, hate brings. But yeah, it was interesting to see the Caterhams running. Well, one of them was running in the points for a while before problem, and some other manufacturers are not used to seeing up there so far. The Rosses were up there in the points and finished in the points. Ricciardo finishing second. Magnussen finishing third in his first race ever. I mean, it was a really exciting race in my opinion.
It was a really exciting race, and I think the one thing that we didn't have was the rain. The rain almost came down towards the end of the race, however, it did stay away. And it was interesting from start to finish. Of course, yeah, unfortunately. We had that big incident right at the very start of the race. Kobayashi back in his first race in Formula One, and involved in an incident. Nick, it wasn't fully Kobayashi's fault.
It wasn't. What happened was on the start, he veered too much to the right and actually hit the back of Raikkonen's car, which actually made his tire. It basically disintegrated his suspension, and he kind of just locked up into the back of, I think it was Masi he went into, and that ended his race prematurely. Nobody really saw how quickly happened really quick, so nobody really saw the tire and suspension disintegrate. But that's pretty much how I saw it happen.
And Kobe actually posted on Twitter that he found out the system fail was no rear brake, and that was the problem of the accident. He apologized to Felipe, however, it was not his mistake. Of course, Felipe and Kobayashi went to the steward's office after the race, Randy, and the steward said, yeah, no foul.
Yeah, sometimes just the accident itself is enough penalty. I think if you get into a situation where even if there's a blatant mistake for a driver, everyone gets penalized, I think it's dumb in my opinion. Oh well, these things happen, it's going to happen when we kind of... Yeah, I think definitely a good call by the stewards to just say it's one of those new cars. This was kind of expected, to be honest.
Kind of expected, yes. And of course, attrition overall was kind of high as well. And we had Kobayashi out the race, Massa out the race, of course, that first incident, Hamilton out the race, Vettel out the race, Ericsson, Maldonado, and Grosjean all out of the race. Bianchi technically was classified, but finished in the 16th position. We had 14 cars finish, but Nick, that's a lot higher than many people thought. We almost thought at one point that, you know, if you finish the race, you're going to get a point, and that wasn't the case.
Yeah, actually, there was a article that said if there's a chance that nobody will finish the race, and I was almost believing it from how it was written, because I kept looking at the testing sessions, and every team had problems, with the exception of Mercedes, but they had their own problems. So while looking through that and looking at the article and kind of just seeing what's happening around, it kind of made sense that there's a chance that nobody could finish this race. And if you do finish the race, there's a high chance you're getting points. But they were wrong. The race turned out to be one of the best things I've seen in a while. Qualifying, practice, and the race, all great. They were wrong.
There's still some worries on Nick as far as the Renaults go, because of course you had both the Lotuses out of the race and also Vettel out of the race. So as far as the Renault guys are concerned, there are still some very big concerns.
There's a lot to be determined with how they run their cars. A lot of people expected Grosjean and Maldonado to both wreck out in different fashions while still not finishing the race, but in order to do that, their cars actually have to make it to a point to where they can possibly wreck somebody else in a good battle. But you know, they got to figure out their car first before we can even think about how the drivers are going to do.
And we do have some breaking news. Ted Kravitz from Sky Sports F1 has just tweeted this, but also it will probably come through as official in a couple of moments' time that Daniel Ricciardo has been disqualified from the event. And again, this comes back to the FIA regulation 5.1.4, which talks about Article 5 is about the power unit, 5.1 is about engine specifications, 5.1.4 says fuel mass flow must not exceed 100 kilograms per hour. Now, I'm not a technical guru, so I'm not fully understanding what this means. However, we'll bring Rob Cost in on this as well, because he broke it to me. He's out of the race, Ricciardo, and
he's not been disqualified yet, Will.
Not yet.
They're investigating.
Investigating.
It was Ted Kravitz that posted it on Twitter just a minute ago, and obviously I fired it to you, and then he told me to come in here, so I did. Basically they're thinking he's used more fuel than he should have done, basically, for the race.
Which is crazy, because you only get 100 kilograms of fuel anyway. So it's the sort of thing that we know most of these guys were going to be in fuel-saving mode, but then you had the second installation lap, which made it a little bit easier. One safety car period made it a little bit easier. So they could burn more fuel. However, by the wording
it's the fuel flow, have you seen that?
The wording of the regulation states basically that you can't run above a certain power. So yes, you've got that 100 kilograms of fuel, but it's then down to how you use it over the course of the race. You want to save fuel, you can save some fuel, but you can't turn the torque up too much so that you're almost in what would be classified back in the 80s as a qualifying spec, because that has a huge impact on the way the turbo works, especially with fuel flow mass.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's how he could keep ahead of Magnussen, because, I mean, admittedly, on the radio conversations, McLaren said to Kevin to push hard because Ricciardo was struggling. Now, obviously, they do get a bit more information than we do, so maybe that's that, and maybe they had to turn it up a little bit more to keep the gap. Hence the reason Kevin couldn't get past him.
But
Who knows?
I mean, there's two things here, Randy. First one, a lot of upset, annoyed Australian fans, if that was to be the case. You know, he outperformed Vettel on the day, mainly because Vettel retired, but a sterling job by Ricciardo. However, if he gets disqualified, that's going to be a huge blow for Red Bull, getting no points. I think it's going to be the first time where you've got a double DNF for Red Bull in possibly since Turkey, or when you had the two crash out. But it's going to be for them, huge blow, but for the Australian fans, a huge blow. And you've got to argue as well, surely there's got to be something in the settings to avoid this happening.
Yeah, it'll definitely, like you said, be a huge blow. It'll be the first time in a while where I can think of both Red Bull cars didn't finish a race, and it wasn't a case where they wrecked each other out. But yeah, that is for sure something those engineers can keep an eye on. Just with all the sensors they have and all the computers they have, there has to be a way that they can determine how much fuel is in the car, whether with ride height or with really anything, cornering speed. Something has to be there. But the fact that they let that happen is a huge blunder, and they've let it happen in the past as well. I can think of where they've had issue with fuel. Weber with qualifying, running out of gas, and I think it was in Malaysia.
Yep.
So maybe a consistent issue with Red Bull with fuel number, perhaps.
Rob, I mean, let's be honest here. When there's a grey area in the regulations, you try and exploit the grey area as much as you possibly can, and Red Bull have historically always been right on the limit of what you can and can't do. You've got to argue, though, that, you know, the rules say something. You have got to keep within the rules, and it'll be interesting, though, to see how the FIA can, how do I dare say, prove this, because yes, you've got software readouts from all the teams, but how can the FIA in many ways, you know, prove this so quickly?
Well, the thing that I don't understand from the information that we're getting now is, I reckon it could be just a sensor that's not working properly, because the maths don't make sense. You're allowed 100 kilos for the race, right? The race lasted 93 minutes, so that means with a maximum 100 kilos in the fuel tank, the highest average fuel flow for the Red Bull could have and still finished the race would have been just 64.5 kg. So that doesn't go over the 100 kg per minute or whatever it is, the ruling. So something not quite right somewhere, whether it's a faulty sensor or something that's giving the wrong information back, because that makes sense. If you break it down to simple maths, then there's something a little bit wrong somewhere, because you would run out of fuel if the flow rate was that high. So it's all hypothetical and speculation at the moment, obviously. So we'll have to wait for the FIA, basically. But yeah, of course, in F1, everyone pushes the envelope to the maximum, and Red Bull are renowned for doing that. Adrian Newey's not one to not take advantage of grey areas. He's been doing it throughout his F1 career.
But the wording of the ruling, and again, the rule just states fuel mass flow must not exceed 100 kilograms per hour. That doesn't state over the course of the race. That doesn't state, the way I read that, it means at any point of the race. So, you know, yes, the average will be whatever, 64-ish kg per hour. However, of course, you had 10 minutes worth of safety car in there when you'll be running almost zero.
Yeah.
So essentially what that must mean, at some point he was told to push, and he just cranked out some very fast laps, during which point he was running above that limit.
I still don't think there's any way you could get that big of a discrepancy, though, because we're not talking like a couple kilos difference here. We're talking like 30 to 40 kilos you would have to be using more fuel on average.
But it's the flow, ran. It's the flow through the sensor.
Yes, I know it's an average. It's the average fuel flows through the sensor, and then the math, and it's per kilos per hour. But that's a huge, like, even over the course of one lap, like, even if that might be an extra 2 kilos of fuel, that's a huge amount of fuel to be burning per lap extra than you would on a normal lap anyway. I mean, even if you wide it out over the course of multiple laps over the course of the race, that's a lot of fuel to be burning, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's an air somewhere. Rob was saying.
Rob, overall though, that really, it will just put a huge dent in Red Bull because, yes, they got over the right reliability issues with Ricciardo's car, and to then have those points taken away from them, not only does it move McLaren even further ahead in the Constructors' Championship after one race, but it's a huge setback to Red Bull overall.
Yeah, definitely. If they do get disqualified, obviously they're going to be down in the constructors' points with Vettel not finishing, and then if Ricciardo gets disqualified or whatever. But it looks like there's a few instances of dodgy data through all the teams, to be fair, from what I've just found. So Red Bull, it's the first race. I expect Red Bull to be
Back
on pole. In Malaysia, it's their track. It's all turning. They've got the corner speed of that car's good. It's the straight line speed, as always, with the Red Bull that lets them down. And historically, Melbourne, Albert Park's always been a McLaren power track.
Yeah.
Not McLaren, Mercedes power track. So,
but
in the last few years.
But what you think about Malaysia? It's a very hot track. Malaysia's historically the warmest track that we go to. It's got incredibly high humidity as well. And then you think back to all the issues that Red Bull have had over the winter with cooling. Actually, Malaysia is going to be the most difficult track of the season.
True, but Red Bull consistently had problems with cooling with that Renault engine over the last 4 years as well, with alternative failures, etc., and the tight packaging of it. Adrian Newey. This time, obviously, heat is a lot more of an issue, but they seem to have sorted that out because obviously they weren't stopping after 10 laps. The problem Vettel had was just cylinders, wasn't overheating or anything, so they seem to have got some reliability back. Obviously that's the longest race run that they've done with the car, and it's got them to, well, at the moment a second place. Whether that changes or not is a different story, but I don't think they're in as much trouble now. I think they've worked super hard. I don't think they're in as much trouble now as everyone thinks they are. I think they'll be a lot quicker and a lot closer next race at one of the tracks that they race.
Now, Nick, let's talk about a couple of the drivers in this race. Of course, Rosberg had an absolute blinder of a start, getting past his teammate and also getting past Ricciardo. I mean, that was Fernando Alonso style start from the last couple of years. That was how good it was.
Yeah, it was a great start from him. I really expected Hamilton to get off to a great start and just kind of take this completely to the end, but he lost power straight at the beginning of the race, which pretty much shocked everybody, yet shocked nobody at the exact same time. But once Rosberg was actually able to get some power down, he was able to take off, never looked back. We even saw Ricciardo sneak past Hamilton before the first corner, and then after that, Magnussen kind of took hold of the podium, and it was just those three till the end, and it was a great race.
And Rosberg, you say, he just looked absolutely dominant today, Randy. You have a look at the start, dominant. You have a look at the restart after that safety car period, again, absolutely dominant. And he didn't put a foot wrong in this Grand Prix. You always compare Hamilton and Rosberg, and you got two very different drivers there, almost like Senna and Prost. Rosberg is the Prost, the thinker, and Hamilton in many ways is the Senna, the pure driver. But today, even if it was to be, a clean battle between Hamilton and Rosberg, I don't think Rosberg would have been touchable at all.
Yeah, there's definitely, like you said, some driving. The way they drive the cars is different. And Rosberg, like you said, he was just superb today. He didn't put a foot wrong. He won by, 20-something seconds over anybody? I mean, he blitzed the field like the way we're used to see Vettel doing past seasons. But it was definitely a superb drive from Rosberg. Whether or not Hamilton would have had anything for him, it's tough to say. But those Mercedes are definitely looking strong, man.
And Rob, you say 20 seconds plus. That was with a safety car period. That just really underlines the dominance that Mercedes engine has and that Mercedes team has had coming into the season.
Exactly. You just got to look at the Mercedes powered cars to see that. Williams, Mercedes power, brilliant. I'm sure Bottas would have got on the podium if he hadn't clipped the wall. He was flying. Yeah, I mean that Brackley team has always been good. I mean, even over the last few years where their car hasn't been the best, they've always worked hard to at least one or two of the races where they've showed potential. And then this year, obviously, they've got that. It seems they've got the package to have. But it's the Mercedes power plant as well has been like sensational. Look at McLaren; it seems to be drivable. Kevin Magnussen saying like the power delivery is good, and Button is saying he likes the power delivery of the engine. So it seems like they're almost level in drivability with the Renault engine that's always been renowned for being the easier one to drive out of everything. So yeah, but I think Williams will be all right as well this season. I think they may have had that podium from young Magnussen and that if Bottas hadn't clipped the wall.
Yeah, Bottas, a phenomenal drive by him, Nick. Of course, he did touch that wall coming out of the second chicane, which caused that puncture, which then caused the safety car due to the debris on the racetrack. And you have got to say that he had probably the drive of the race due to the fact that he managed to come back through the field, come home in 6th, and what a pass he had over his countryman, Kimi Räikkönen.
Yeah, that was a great run by him, but the pass on Raikkonen can't all be accredited to Bottas, even though he ran a great race. But Raikkonen was overdriving his car through the duration of the race. But still, coming from where he did while losing his tire, having the full course caution come out, and driving from the back of the field all the way to points, and like being in 6th, it's pretty much it's a great accomplishment of doing that form of motorsport.
I want to go back very quickly to talk about Mercedes because there is one point, Rob, that needs to be remembered here. Last time we had a huge rule change, it was Brawn GP. That was by far the superior car at the start of the season. This time out, new rule change. It's pretty much exactly the same team who are the best team out of the box, and it's almost a repeat of 5 years ago.
Yeah, it is, but they're missing. I think a lot of that's got to be down to Ross Brawn, who started the development of the new car last year, and obviously he's had experience of rule changes, as you've alluded to, with Brawn, and also Ferrari. Yeah, wherever he's been, actually, he's always been. He designs great cars, always has done, brilliant cars. But Ross Brawn has always delivered teams, if that makes sense, when something changes, the actual team ethic and how they work. And it's funnily enough, the last 2 teams he's been at with rule changes are now at the front, like Brawn at the front, and everyone caught up in the last half of the season. Now Mercedes at the front. But I think the catch-up might be a little bit quick, because obviously Red Bull got 4 years of winning everything, so I don't think they're going to be too slow on catching the Mercedes boys.
No, and to suffix what you said there, 1994, I think you had the big rule change with the refueling, and you had Benetton come and win that championship. Yes, in controversial fashion, when you consider, all of the infringements that was going on that season, the whole traction control debate, and
engine mode at the final, whatever it was.
And then, of course, Adelaide to finish off the season. Then, of course, you had it with Ferrari. You had you had more of the tyre changes there, from Goodyear to more Bridgestone. He seemed to do well there. Then, again, in the Ferrari days with the rule changes, 2001, I think, he was just absolutely dominant for those periods. And then he moved over to Brawn, now Mercedes, and yeah, I completely agree. Ross Brawn is one of the best doers in the history of Formula One. McLaren, though, they are back, and if Ricciardo gets disqualified, you're going to have 2 McLarens on the podium. Could you think after last year that McLaren was going to get 2 cars on the podium, Randy?
No, not really, and especially to do it with such a new driver is just extraordinary. I mean, Mark Webber tweeted giving props to McLaren for having the balls to put talent and not money in one of their driving seats, and I guess paying off dividends. I mean, young Kevin Magnussen comes out and gets P3, possibly P2, depending on this ruling, and you ask for anything more from a rookie first time out?
No, you can't. However, Rob first, then Nick. The big issue for McLaren is right now, when you look at their car, there's something lacking, and that's really sponsors.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure they get some through. I mean, Mobile One, they're not exactly a small company. I'm sure they're all right. But yeah, they're still sponsored by Santander on their race seats. Vodafone obviously pulled out, or they didn't decide to renew their sponsorship because F1's expensive. So I kind of like teams with just the one sponsor and not having it blazed over their cars. Like, I think the Martini sponsorship looks cool on the Williams because it's quite subtle. It's not in your face like the Red Bulls and that. Like, it's boring. We've seen that Red Bull design for how many years now? Come on, boys, change it up. They've got so many different cans. You know, you can get cranberry flavoured. Do a silver car or something else, a different blue car or a lighter blue car with the silver Red Bull, like on some of their cans. It's just boring.
Well, of course, they did have the film movie ones at Monaco for a couple of years.
Yes, yeah, that was cool. That was better, but yeah, it's kind of a little bit boring.
But remember the time, though, when pretty much every car looked about the same, and then Red Bull was the one that was really different, and now we're all getting bored about the fact that the Red Bull looks the same. It would actually be interesting to alternate it every so often. Of course, there is the thing that you have to run the same scheme on both the cars. Let's not forget BAR 1999 here. But it would be nice to occasionally see the red car, or even on the Toro Rosso. I think it'd be nice to see a completely different design of the Toro Rosso.
Yeah, that's something I definitely like with NASCAR. Like with some of the bigger events in NASCAR, you'll see the teams that run an alternate scheme just to change it up. And I think it's definitely a good move that they're making. I think it's something that some of the Formula One teams should look into. Like Rob pointed out, some of the different can designs, they have different flavors. Just throw out a different color, throw out a silver colored car somewhere. I don't know I'm not really flavors, so I can't.
The thing with Formula One is, if they could change schemes like that, they would. But the FIA, they're really strict when it comes to that. I don't know why, but I remember reading across the rules maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and there has to be like some kind of procedure that they have to go through to even get a scheme change discussed. Like when they did the fan car for, I can't remember what race it was, or when they did the movie car. It's like, even with such a small logo, they have to go through the entire FIA process just to even see about getting it changed. Like, even if, say, they were to bring an alcohol company on board, they'd have to talk to the FIA, talk about it, go through everything, and then go to Abu Dhabi. They have to go through it again just to get it taken off the car. It's a really long process, so some teams are just, it's really not worth going through it just to see some difference.
Although, Rob, on a slightly more humorous note, I'm slightly surprised that you haven't had a company like Durex come into Formula One just yet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, what with the noses on each car, it would be quite amusing to have one emblazoned on the nose. Speaking of the noses, obviously, it's a little bit dangerous with Kobayashi going underneath that car. That was a bit scary. If that had been any quicker, that could have been quite nasty.
And that sums up a lot of the fears as well that some of the drivers have been having about the front noses. And of course, the FIA have said they'll sort it out for 2015. And let's not forget, not all of them have, how do I say this in a way that won't offend anyone, noses that protrude from the bottom of the car and stick out a little bit. Of course, Renault has a female version of that. Lotus have a female version of that. But that
not a
that
female
was quite
version.
scary.
It's a camel's foot version.
Yes.
Ferrari with a vacuum.
Yep. Yeah, Ferrari, of course, looks like Henry the Hoover, doesn't it, Rob?
Yeah, it's not my favourite looking car, that's for sure.
I actually like it.
No, they normally design nice cars, and the nicest looking cars are Merc. And then the McLaren is not too bad. But the rest, yeah, not cool.
I don't mind the Red Bull nose actually.
If you
Because you
don't
can't
pay,
see it because it's not painted.
Yeah.
yeah, if you don't pay attention, it's not that bad.
No, it could be a lot worse. And to say the Kobayashi crash, it really does sum up what some of the issues were about the front noses this season. And it's not just about them being absolutely butt ugly. Some of them also could potentially be very dangerous. And I wouldn't even be surprised if there is a big crash for the FIA to mandate a change mid-season on that. A couple of other drivers in this race. Fernando Alonso, P5 provisionally for Ferrari. Kimi Raikkonen, P8 for Ferrari. Now, in post-race interviews, Rob, Raikkonen was not a happy bunny.
No, again, it's down to it's the same, it's similar scenario you had with Lotus. Just because I think it's due to his rally driving, he sort of changed his driving style a little bit. He likes quite a light car, a light feeling car. It has to like steer well, almost really edgy, and I don't think he's got that. I don't think he's got the power steering where he wants it. I don't think he's got the fly-by-wire braking. Definitely won't help him because he's kind of seat your pants, like living on the edge kind of driver. Whereas the younger drivers that come through, the rookies that are doing super well, they don't really know any different, if that makes sense. Because when you're younger, you tend to learn quicker, you adapt faster. I think it's going to take a few races for Raikkonen to settle into the team again.
Well, that's the
and
issue.
get the car where he wants it.
That's the issue that Damon Hill had, and I remember that's one of the reasons why he retired in '99, because they moved from the big fat Goodyears to the very skinny grooved Bridgestones, and he just never could get his head around it, could he?
No, he had issues with it. The technology surpassed his. Well, not talent. He was talented. He could wheel a car, that's for sure, but he just couldn't adapt. Because when he retired, how old was he? 30 something. He wasn't.
He was old when he came in.
Yeah, he was old when he started, wasn't he? So he wasn't the youngest driver. It's like you give a 7-year-old kid an Xbox game and they pick it up quicker than most of us could. It'd be like, well, I have to ask my nephew what to do in Lego games.
Yeah.
Oh, do it. Do you know what I mean? Because they pick it up really fast. Their learning rate, their capacity for learning is a lot quicker because they don't think.
And Nick, that is one thing worth considering, because you've got Magnussen getting a podium on his first Grand Prix. You've got drivers like Raikkonen who's struggling. We've seen Hamilton talking about how it's so difficult and how he's almost had to do a degree to understand the new car. The same can apply to the established drivers like Alonso, for example. Might be one of the other reasons why Webber left at the end of last year. And you look in WEC as well, Alan McNish left because he felt the technology surpassed him and he didn't want to have to really adapt his driving style that he's had for 11, 12 years now.
Yeah, if you think about it, all the new drivers who just got into new cars, like Ricciardo, Magnussen, all the young drivers, they did really well this race, and that's because they didn't have to deal with what all the other drivers were used to last year. Like if you look at what Raikkonen had to go through, he was so used to being able to drive his Lotus a certain way, and then everything just being changed right in front of his eyes. He got rushed into it, overdrove his car. I wouldn't say he did terrible, but it's not up to his usual standards. And then you look at, well, I can't really judge Vettel, but he didn't really perform up to par when he was on the track. All the older drivers who have been here for a bit of a time didn't do so well, other than Nico, but he won the race, so we can't really say anything about him. But all the younger drivers did a lot better than most people expected them to, because they didn't have to go from something old to something new. They just basically hopped in and were able to just adapt while everybody else had to try to change what they were used to and try to get into these new cars.
You know what it is? I just remembered this. Kimi doesn't like doing simulator work particularly. All the young kids do. So the fly-by-wire braking is something they used to do in the simulator. As such, when they're doing all their miles in the simulator, because obviously they had to learn the cars, so it's all the simulator work with and obviously the braking feels different to driving a car. Maybe it's not so different from the simulator. Yeah, you know what I mean, simulator anymore. So maybe that's a big reason. And one thing Martin Brundle said in the post-race that I didn't quite agree with was the fact that these drivers are coming up through the lower formulas with having lots of downforce and no power. Not strictly true with Renault 3.5 and GB2. They've got a lot of power and not a lot of downforce. Their power outweighs their downforce. So maybe the cars aren't too dissimilar from what they're actually used to torque to downforce-wise, if that makes sense.
And that's useful because there's so much downforce that's to be taken off of these cars. And unlike years gone past, Rob, it's not the sort of thing that they take downforce off and then all the teams find a way of putting it all back on with things like blown rear diffusers, etc. ad nauseum. Here, they've actually lost downforce for the 2014 season, and they've actually lost downforce, and it's really come back into the drivers, because we've seen so many people lock up and go off and almost spin, and
I've been all over the place, but you know what? Out of all the young drivers, Kvyat, Magnussen, all those guys that are in their rookie seasons didn't really have a mistake. If you think back through the race, Kvyat might have locked up once, I think, in the whole race. So, yeah, maybe they're a little closer than people think, like downforce-wise, to what the younger guys are actually used to, and therefore they can, again, goes back to their quickness to adapt to the to it. Maybe it's like, all right, actually this car's all right. It's just a bit quicker than what I've been driving already. Same sort of feeling. So maybe it's not too different for them. Hence the reason they can perform. I mean, Kvyat, the youngest driver to score World Championship points ever. Have we got another Seb Vettel on our hands? Because the last person that did that is now a 4-time world champ.
Yep, and I say he might even get 2 points if Ricciardo gets disqualified from this event, and that would put him on a scale very close to Kimi Räikkönen back in 2001, to be fair. So, let's finish off very quickly on some of those other teams. Force India, P7 for Nico Hülkenberg provisionally, and P11 provisionally for Sergio Perez. Toro Rosso, P9 and P10 provisionally. Force India started so well and just faded towards the end of the race, Nick.
Yeah, I didn't really pay attention to Force India through the race, but I noticed that after a point in time, I think it was Hülkenberg was catching up to he was kind of on the pace to Magnussen, but he had to deal with Alonso and everything. And I don't remember exactly what happened. It might have been a pit cycle that went wrong or something, but he kind of just fell back at the end, and he was kind of there, but kind of wasn't the entire race. They had a good race. They got points. That's what they're there for. So they did what they accomplished, but they could have did more.
And, of course, we'll move on to looking at the next race of the Formula 1 World Championship, and that will be at Malaysia. I talked about this a little bit earlier on, Rob. It's going to be mighty, mighty hot at Malaysia in just 2 weeks' time, and that will scare some of the teams because it's arguably going to be the toughest race of the season.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be interesting. As I said, the teams with the less straight line speed, as long as they got their corner speed, it might be a lot closer in 2 weeks. I forgot when we were talking about Ferrari, they're actually overweight by 18 kilos as well, and that's quite a lot of weight to be overweight by, and that's like adding a quarter of me to a car, and I'm not the smallest person. Basically, so they're overweight, which might allude to why they're not as competitive as they should be. But yeah, back to Malaysia, yeah, it's going to be super hot. It could be monsoons, it could be anything. You never know what you're going to get, really, out there.
2001 Malaysian Grand Prix was just amazing for that. If you remember, they started the race and within about 2-3 laps, it's just that torrential downpour. And the weather at Malaysia is always all over the place. You always think about Spa, Nick, as being the place where the weather can change. But really, Malaysian Grand Prix has shown that that track can be as unpredictable. And let's not forget, it is monsoon season over there.
Yeah, Malaysia, Australia, and Spa, those are all really bad with weather. In Malaysia, you can pretty much expect it for it to be, 43 degrees and then have it be raining at the same time. So you're trying to figure out what you're supposed to run with your car. So you're kind of confused, yet you kind of know what to expect, but you still have no clue what's going on while you're still racing a car at somewhere around 300 kilometers an hour going down the backstretch. It's really crazy for the drivers and not even want to think about how the engineers had to deal with this.
And who's your pick for the next round, Randy?
Oh, that's so tough to say. There's so much going on, so many teams having issues, but especially with the new regs, I think it's really up in the air.
Rob?
You know, there's some front runners like they,
Yeah, Randy, sorry.
like even with the front runners, like with Mercedes, we saw them have. I mean, they had issues before the race even started. They're reporting that Lewis was having issues with power. You almost can't call it.
Rob?
I'm going to go with Bottas in the Williams.
Nick?
I'm going to go for broke here and say John-Eric Vernon, the Toro Rosso.
Wow.
I'm just surprised Nick didn't say Kobayashi.
He's good, but he's not that good. I'm not crazy. Well, I might be. That's a different story.
I'm going to go on a Ferrari comeback because Ferrari's also been pretty good at Malaysian Pass. I'm going to say Kimi Räikkönen because, well, you know.
I find it quite entertaining. None of us went for the obvious three. Went McLaren, Mercedes, or Red Bull.
Nah.
I was thinking Magnussen, but
they're
he's
all
still
within shot as well.
Yeah. Well, that is all we have time for. Thank you very much to Mr. Robcast, to Nick, and to Randy. We'll be back the next time the Formula 1 World Championship comes into town, and that will be at Kuala Lumpur on the 30th of March. We'll be with you soon after the race finishes with myself and maybe even Nick Rowland if he gets up in time. Who knows? But we'll be back for that the next time there's a race on. Myself, Will Vincent, and all the gang will talk to you all next time.